On March 9, 1923, Molly Burkhart was supposed to spend the night at her sister Rita's house, but she decided against it because her 2-year-old son James Cowboy had to be taken to the doctor for a chronic earache. At 3 a.m. the next day, a bomb exploded in the Target house, killing Molly's sister, a maid, and 4 days later, her husband Bill Smith. The macabre plot began when the Osages were expelled from their ancestral lands by the U.S. government and bought 600,000 hectares of land to establish their new home in a dry and rocky region in northeastern Oklahoma in 1872. In 1906, James Bighart, the Maine chief of the nation, managed to negotiate with the U.S. government an agreement that would give each Osage the right to participate in the tribe's mineral fund, a right that could not be sold to third parties, as it could only be transmitted as an inheritance among the inhabitants of the county. Years later, this would be extremely important when oil fields were found in that region. With large profits from drilling for black gold, members of the Osage Nation became some of the richest people in the world. Consequently, this ended up attracting envious looks from businessmen, overwhelmingly white men and con artists who coveted the tribe's fortune, a reality that resulted in a real massacre when mysterious murders of Osages began to haunt the place, giving rise to what would later be called Reign of Terror. One of the most terrible periods in the history of the United States, with the serial massacre of several Osage members. The Reign of Terror. The terror that would befall the Osage that left the land soaked in blood began in 1921 when 2 members of the nation, Anna Brown and Charles Whitehorn, were murdered just a few days apart and under similar circumstances, shot and found in isolated rural areas. In total, it is estimated that 24 members of the Osage tribe died during that period, many of whom were from Molly Burkhart's family, a member of the tribe who had 4 family members killed. These murders had begun a few years earlier, when her sister died of a mysterious debilitating disease in 1918. In May 1921, the month of the flower moon, Anna Brown, Molly Burkhart's older sister, was found dead in a field. And a few months later their mother Lizzie supposedly died from poisoning. Molly saw her sisters and relatives being brutally murdered without local authorities moving to investigate them. Shots or poisoning were the methods most used by criminals, or some people simply disappeared and were never seen again. Even dogs they had for security were killed, and victims followed the same pattern: rich native people. After Anna Brown's death, Molly Burkhart decided to hire investigators on her own to try to discover who was behind her sister's murder and possibly other murdered Osages. Soon enough, the county found itself facing unprecedented terror, as sheriffs didn't seem too interested in trying to find out what was really happening there. This attitude led to many murders never being properly solved. It was only when deaths began to gradually increase that the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, decided to intervene. The problem is that the organization was still taking its first steps when it took on what would become its first major homicide investigation case. The FBI's first major investigation, established in 1908, the FBI was far from earning the prestige it has today when it took on the case. This is because, in the 1920s, the organization was not even 2 decades old, and its agents were not well prepared. In view of this, investigations were poorly conducted all the time, which aroused some apprehension from J. Edgar Hoover, director of the FBI, who remained in office for 37 years, and was an essential piece in the foundation of the police organization. It was only in the summer of 1925, to solve the case of the Osage's murders, Hoover asked for help from Tom White, a Texan agent who took control of the investigations with the support of a secret team that infiltrated the indigenous county of Oklahoma as insurance sellers, cattle buyers, and citizens to collect evidence that could discover the culprits. Sure enough, Tom White's team scoured the area for months until they discovered that William Hale, a rich and influential farmer in the region, built a ranch on the Osage Reserve and enriched himself by raising cattle there, becoming known as the King of Osage Hills. William Hale was uncle to Molly Burkhart's husband, Ernest Burkhart. As rights to oil revenues could only be legally obtained by outsiders if they were married to tribe members, Hale encouraged his nephew Ernest to marry then Molly Kyle. They married in 1917. Hale was behind a conspiracy that wanted to eliminate the Osages, including Molly's own relatives, as a means of taking the tribe's fortune for himself. The magnate's tactic was to hire criminals to do the dirty work on his behalf. And to greater surprise, they discovered that they planned for Molly to die as well. Their fortunes grew as they inherited properties from these dead family members. Molly's cousin, Harry Roan, died in 1923, and Hale fraudulently named himself beneficiary of Roan's life insurance policy. The involvement of powerful and greedy figures in the local white community was revealed. On January 4, 1926, William Hale and Ernest Burkhart were finally arrested thanks to a witness statement from a jailed criminal named Blackie Thompson. In addition, Molly's husband also confessed his role in the crime and testified against his uncle during trial. William Hale was released on parole in 1947 after serving 2 decades of his sentence and died in 1962 at age 87. Ernest Burkhart was released in 1937 but soon returned to prison after robbing a bank. He was released after receiving a pardon from the governor of Oklahoma in 1965. He died in 1986 at age 94. Molly, against all odds, survived Hale and Burkhart's murderous conspiracy. The killers began poisoning her, but she recovered and survived long enough to separate from Ernest during trial. She remarried in 1928 and died in 1937 at age 50. Today, Molly's granddaughter Margie Burkhart lives in Tahlequah, Oklahoma. She says that suddenly Molly and her 2 sons were ostracized by the Osage. The Osage's members blamed Molly for bringing Ernest into their tribe. She also says that when Ernest Burkhart was released from prison, he went to live with his great-uncle. She was struck by how harmless Ernest seemed to be, a man who helped destroy entire families, including his own. With fluffy white hair and bright blue eyes. He seemed very shy, she said, adding, he looked like a grandfather. You saw him on the street and had no idea what he had done. Margie Burkhart began seeking information on her own. Gradually, she came to understand all dimensions of racism and greed that drove conspirators, as well as removal, oppression, and cultural theft suffered by her ancestors. Many Osage's murders remain unanswered to this day. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel and share this video with those who like true crime stories.